I'm not sure there's an ingredient out there that can enhance the flavor of food more than salt, but there's a bunch of different kinds out there. Let's talk about them. I always ask people, have you ever had a tomato? And then have you ever had a tomato seasoned with salt? A world of difference. The flavor, incredible by something so simple as seasoning with salt. It is such an important ingredient in your everyday cooking and will absolutely elevate everything that you're making at home. First though, let's start off by talking about table salt. Table salt, or iodized salt, is mined rock salt that is purified to mostly sodium chloride, which is the chemical name for salt. It's then mixed with some anti-caking agents, which, no offense, is loaded with junk to ensure it pours out easily. Now, a lot of folks say this salt is the best because it has iodine in it, which is beneficial for thyroid health. However, you get iodine from plenty of other natural foods like fish, milk, cheese, eggs, etc. I don't really ever use table salt. However, I feel that its best use is seasoning French fries because the small grains will actually stick to French fries unlike bigger grains of salt like sea or kosher. Although you could just buy the fine ground version of those salts as well. Table salt is super cheap, it's extremely accessible, and I find you use way less when seasoning because it's so fine it can spread easily on everything you season. You may also sometimes notice a slight bitter aftertaste. And now on to kosher salt. This is essentially identical to table salt, but the crystals are much larger. There's no added iodine. I remember hearing the first day of culinary school how important it was to learn to transition away from table salt and into kosher salt. I remember learning to season with those large chunks of salt and just how much better everything tastes. You will definitely use more of this salt than table salt when seasoning because the crystals are so big. However, the flavor is so much more intense. Kosher salt is a perfect table salt replacement if you're looking for more intense salt flavor on your food, but you won't be shaking out of a shaker. You'll be seasoning it by hand. Honestly, you can use kosher salt in just about every recipe out there. It'll cost you a bit more than table salt, but still very cheap. However, make sure you read the labels because some brands will use anti-caking agents. And next, we've got sea salt. Sea salt is just evaporated seawater, and depending on where it came from, the mineral content can vary. I almost now exclusively use sea salt in my recipes. It's just a very low processed natural ingredient. I love the light saltiness of it and of course the crunch. I usually only ever buy the coarse version of this salt and use it on just about everything from baking to grilling to finishing sauces with. Because sea salt requires a bit of labor to make it, you'll find that it does cost a bit more than table or kosher salt, but it is way better to me. In addition, sea salt is commonly smoked to add tasty wood flavors to it, which would then turn into smoked salt and can be used in a bunch of different recipes. And I really do think that's why I transitioned away from kosher to sea salt. It's just much more natural. I love the light salt flavors of it. It's always accessible. I mean, you can get it at every single grocery store out there. If you can't get it there, I don't know what's going on. Okay, let's talk about gray salt. Gray salt is also known as Celtic salt. It's harvested with wooden rakes from the lower floor of salt tidal pools all around France. It has less sodium than regular table salt and is much higher in mineral content. It has a bright, almost brine-like, tangy sort of flavor to it due to its mineral content and is obviously typically gray in color. It's a fantastic cooking salt and can be used in every recipe you make. This is definitely a moister salt, so it doesn't necessarily sprinkle with ease because it can clump together slightly. And because of its large, soft crystals, it's great to finish off protein, especially fish and pork, if you ask me, and of course, vegetables. This salt is super cool. Honestly, if you just take a bite of it with your hands, the crunch is just a little bit soft. It's still a little wet. The flavors are awesome. I mean, honestly, it's almost like finishing it with salt and a little bit of clean acid like lemon in there because of that briny flavor. Very, very good. One of my all-time favorites. Okay, next, Himalayan salt. This salt is mined in the Himalayan mountains of Pakistan, and while it's mostly sodium chloride, the traces of iron oxide is what gives it its pink color. In addition, it is said that Himalayan salt has up to 84 other minerals in it, which is why I guess people go crazy over it. The flavor of it, however, is very similar to table or kosher salt, but with a much cleaner finish with almost no bitter aftertaste. Because you can buy big slabs of it, you'll often see this pink salt used as a cooking stone on the grill or in the oven, where you cook your food directly on the hot salt to not only cook it, but naturally season it. You can buy this in big slabs, large crystals, coarse fine, super fine, you name it. I mean, if they sell it, you're going to have any size you want. This is a really pretty salt to finish meat or veggies with because of its beautiful pink color and crunch. There are also other pink salts like Andean or Hawaiian as well. Just a little FYI there. While a lot of different salt is mined out there, this next one is indigenous to Utah. In fact, Redmond, Utah. The salt color is a little bit of red, pink, white, super intense flavor. I'm talking if you want salt flavor, this is the one that you need because you don't even need that much of it to get all that goodness. Here is how it's harvested. For lack of a better name, I'm just going to call this one mined salt. This is an unrefined sea salt that is harvested in underground salt deposits. The one I'm most common with is the one in Redmond, Utah, which I just told you about. It's from an ancient inland sea known as the Sundance Sea. Since it's mined underground, it's naturally a very dry salt that's loaded with over 60 plus trace minerals. This salt can be purchased in just about any size from fine to coarse and will range in color, as I stated, from white, pink to red. It has a slightly sweet flavor too, which is awesome when seasoning food. This salt is definitely cheaper from Himalayan or Celtic, but it's pricier than your average everyday salt. Last but not least, powder salt. This is seriously one of the coolest salts out there. It's also called flour salt. I learned about this 5 years ago when I was at an Italian restaurant in San Francisco. I sat at a cool table right next to the grill and I kept noticing the griardine, or grill chef, season all the meat with this powder-like seasoning. I kept thinking, is that garlic, onion powder? What is that? So I had to ask. He told me it was flour salt. I just found that fascinating because I'd never seen anything like this before. My guess is because there's no chunks at all that it can very evenly season food. It's essentially pulverized salt until it resembles a powder or flour-like substance. It can be used in just about any cooking and is really good to bake with since it just mixes right in with the other dry ingredients. It's also great to brine with because it dissolves, well, almost instantly. This salt is super cool. And there are obviously so many more salts out there than the ones that I just described to you, but you've got an awesome opportunity to get out there and try some of these because it still goes back to those crazy simple fundamental techniques like seasoning and seasoning with salt to help enhance the flavor of whatever it is you're cooking. Doesn't matter if it's going in a bread recipe or you're finishing off a perfectly grilled steak with it. It will definitely take your food flavors to the top. It is all about elevating your everyday cooking, my friends, even with this simple ingredient like salt. You've got a lot to try out there, so go get it.